Hello, I'm Gwen Hill from Pine Ridge Baptist Church Sunday School Department, ladies class, and we're studying the book of Daniel. We have went over the first three chapters where Daniel and his three friends were taken prisoner of war, and they were taken from their homeland into Babylon. They have completed schooling. They have spent almost 20 years in captivity serving King Nebuchadnezzar. There has been some exciting things happen in chapter 3. Daniel is not mentioned in chapter 3, and we have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego with their wonderful testimony of faith, where they are thrown into the fiery furnace for not worshiping the statue that Nebuchadnezzar has erected. They were victorious in that. God came through for them in a big way, in a miraculous way, and we have a Christophany appearance of Jesus Christ in the furnace. And so now we are in chapter 4. Some time has elapsed. I'm not sure how much time, but I suspect it's been a few years. And Nebuchadnezzar is such a wonderful character to study, and some of these things are very positive and some of these things are very negative about him, but he is a man that God used. God set him up from the very beginning to accomplish his purposes, and he's been given several opportunities to recognize Jesus, to recognize Jehovah God, to recognize Yahweh as the only God, the God. And while he's given verbal acknowledgement, we don't see much in his life to say that it's made a life-changing moment in his history. But today, we may feel a little differently by the time that we finish with today, and definitely by the next study that we do. We won't get through the whole book, whole chapter 4, but we'll get through about half of it. King Nebuchadnezzar is going to acknowledge God, Jehovah God. He gets a little closer to make a personal comment. If I ask you in the Old Testament, or in the Old Testament, are any of the chapters, any of the books, any of the chapters written by any of the kings? You can say, yeah, Solomon wrote, and so did David and others maybe. But what if I ask you, do you know of any Gentile kings that wrote a chapter in our Bible? It'd be harder to come up with an answer then, wouldn't it? Well, here's your answer. King Nebuchadnezzar wrote chapter 4 in Daniel. Very, very special that he wrote that this Gentile king wrote this. So let's begin. Verse 1 in chapter 4 of Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar the king, to all the peoples, the nation, and men of every language that live in all the earth, may your peace abound. He's starting a letter, similar to a letter, and he's identifying who he's writing it to. It has seemed good to me to declare the signs and wonders which the Most High God has done for me. This is a personal testimony. I want to tell you, and in your Bible, it's the Most High God, all caps, all capitals. He's talking about Jehovah God, Yahweh. He said, I want to tell you what the Most High God has done for me. Me, the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. What he's done for me. How great, verse 3, how great are his signs and how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom. His dominion is from generation to generation. He's really praising the Lord. Nebuchadnezzar has finally recognized that God's kingdom is far greater and his dominion is completely unique. And it is because it's an everlasting kingdom. In chapter 2, he found out he was the head of multiple kingdoms, that he was the best. He had the gold head. He was the best. But it would come to an end. And then in chapter 3, he wanted to declare himself an eternal kingdom, and he found out right quick he was not. He came face to face with the Son of God. And he is amazing. He is amazing that he is worshiping God here now and giving him glory and honor. Chapter 4. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at ease in my house and flourishing in my palace. Everything was going well. I'm in my palace. It's a time of peace. I've conquered everybody around me. And I was flourishing in my palace. In verse 5, I saw a dream, and it made me fearful. And these fantasies as I lay on my bed and these visions in my mind kept alarming me. He was having visions. He refers to it a little later as dreams. He's not really sure what was that, but it made a great impression on him. Made a great impression on him. It was an alarming impression. Made him fearful. Made him fearful. And I imagine not very much made this guy fearful. Not much. So in verse 6, he said, So I gave orders to bring into my presence all of my wise men of Babylon, that they may make known to me the interpretation of the dream. He said, I've pondered this and I can't figure it out, so maybe the wise man can. They have spent a lot of time in my service telling me they could, so let's get them in here and see if they can tell me this dream. There's a difference between this dream and the dream or vision than he had in the second chapter. In the second chapter, either he could not remember, or he, as a test, he would not tell them what the dream was. He wanted them to tell his conjurers, his satraps, his magicians. He wanted them to tell him the dream and the meaning. This time, it alludes to the fact that he's going to tell them the dream, and he wants them to tell the meaning, which should be fairly simple. This was something that was really regular in their culture at the time. They put great stock in dreams and what dreams meant, and especially one that was so strong that it had this king frightened. So he wanted it to be interpreted. In verse 7, he says, Then the magicians, the conjurers, the Chaldeans, and the diviners came in, and I related the dream to them. But they could not make its interpretation known to me. Even he sounds like he couldn't believe that they couldn't tell him what it meant, because I think Nebuchadnezzar suspected what it meant. And it was frightening news. But I also suspect if I was a Chaldean in that time, I'm not sure I would want to give this kind of bad news to this man. This man with this history of rage. This man with the history of throwing people into a fiery furnace or blinding people. He has a murderous history. He has a hard history. He is known for wanting judgment, staying up all night and working toward judgment. But he was a fierce judge. So I'm not so sure, even if I knew what the meaning of the dream was, that I would be brave enough to tell him what the dream meaning was. But notice in verse 8, Nebuchadnezzar says, But finally, Daniel came in to me, before me, whose name is Belshazzar, according to the name of my God, and in whom is a spirit of the holy gods, and I related the dream to him. This is the sad verse. Sad in many different reasons. Sad because Nebuchadnezzar consulted everybody before he consulted Daniel, the man that he knew God lived inside of. Do we ever do that? Do you ever wait consult everybody in the world before you consult God? He did. Another thing that's sad, because as you read that verse 8, he said, he's named Belshazzar according to the name of my God. And it's in lowercase. So he's not talking about Yahweh. He's talking about his God. With all of the experience he's had in his mind, he has not embraced Daniel's Yahweh God. He says, I related the dream to him. In verse 9, we're going to hear him relate that dream. O Belshazzar, chief of the magicians. Now Daniel has held that title since chapter 2. Chief of the magicians, since I know that a spirit of the holy gods is in you, and no mystery baffles you, tell me the visions of my dream, which I have seen, along with its interpretation. Now these are the visions in my mind as I lay on my bed. I was looking, and behold, there was a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. He is standing back in his dream and looking forward in a field, and he's seeing a young tree sprout up. And he watched it grow till its height was great. In verse 11, the tree grew large and became strong, and its height reached to the sky, and it was visible to the ends of the earth. It was a mighty, mighty tree, was it not? Its foliage was beautiful, its fruit was abundant, and in it was food for all. The beasts in the field found shade under it, and the birds of the sky dwelt in its branches, and all living creatures fed themselves from it. And I was looking in the visions in my mind as I lay on my bed, and behold, an angelic watcher, a holy one, descended from heaven. I was having this vision of this tree growing and maturing and becoming a giant of a tree, able to have wonderful fruits in it that fed everybody, that shade gave comfort to all the animals around. The birds found their nests in its limbs. I was so impressed. It was kind of like him, was it not? He said this tree was magnificent. Do you see its size? Do you see how it's able to protect those that need it with food, with housing, with shade from hard times? It's quite amazing. And then something further amazing, even more amazing. Here come a watcher. You know, angels are called watchers sometimes in the Bible. And he said, as I was looking at the vision, an angelic watcher, a holy one, descended from heaven. This would have certainly caught his attention. He's seeing a supernatural being coming down from heaven and entering into his vision. Not only was it a vision, but it's auditory, because he's hearing this angelic watcher, this angelic being. He's hearing him shout. When someone shouts, it's usually a sign of power. And this angelic creature was shouting in verse 14. It says, Nebuchadnezzar continues his story, and he says, he shouted, and he spake as followed. Chop down the tree and cut off its branches. Strip off its foliage and scatter its fruits. Let the beasts flee from under it, and the birds from its branches. Yet leave the stump with its roots in the ground, with a band of iron and bronze around it, in the new grass of the field, and let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him share with the beast and the grass of the earth. The tree has now become a man. Did you notice the symbolic change there from the tree to the man? Nebuchadnezzar would have noticed it. Daniel certain noticed it. Remember, Daniel is standing there, and King Nebuchadnezzar is telling him this dream. Can you see Daniel? As the meaning of the dream begins to come over him, and as Nebuchadnezzar speaks, he's also hearing the word of God telling him what this means. This angelic being said, let him share with the beast of the grass of the earth, and let his mind be changed. Verse 16, and let his mind be changed from that of a man, and let a beast mind be given to him, and let 7 periods of time pass over him. This sentence is by the decree of the angelic watchers, and the decision is a command of the holy ones, in order that the living may know that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind, and he bestows it on whom he wishes. He sets it over it, and sets over it the lowliest of men. This angelic being is saying, God has noticed just how arrogant you're getting, Nebuchadnezzar. You're getting more and more arrogant, and it's got to stop. It's going to stop. Nebuchadnezzar, this is who you were. You were this powerhouse of a tree, and you provided, and you did as I asked, but never once did you acknowledge me as your God. Never once. And that these angelic warriors, these angelic watchers, are going to give you a message from the Most High. You're going to be cut down. You're going to be cut down. And look at what it says. Your mind's going to be changed. You are going to be insane. I'm going to take your mind. What good is a wonderful physique? What good is a lot of power? What good is adulation from everyone around you if you don't have a mind? And it's in my hand. And he says, your mind, I'm going to change your mind. From a man to a beast. And this phenomena is not very often, but it has been recorded in 1947, I think. There was a psychologist who wrote a paper on one of his patients who thought he was a cow. I think this is what's going to happen to him. A beast mind is going to be given to you. And how long is this going to last? Not overnight. Not for a week or two. Not for a month or two. It's going to last for 7 times. This is a way of saying 7 years. 7 periods of time are 7 years. So it's going to happen for 7 years. The sentence is a decree that we've been giving the power from the on high God to place on you. And you are going to have this until you realize that even the highest man is lowly when it comes to the Most High God. Pride goeth before a fall. Well, Nebuchadnezzar, you've been arrogant just one too many times. Nebuchadnezzar, you are bringing this on yourself. And then verse 18. This is the dream which I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now you, Belshazzar, tell me its interpretation, inasmuch as none of these wise men in my kingdom is able to make known to me the interpretation, but you are able, for a spirit of the holy gods is in you. You've done it before. You even told me the dream last time. This time I'm telling you the dream. I know you can interpret it for me. Daniel, tell me. something so sweet, something so kind is revealed in verse 19 and 20. Listen. Then Daniel, whose name is Belshazzar, was appalled for a while as his thoughts alarmed him. The king responded and said, Belshazzar, do not let the dream or its interpretation alarm you. Belshazzar replied, my lord, if only the dream applied to those who hate you and its interpretation to your adversaries. Daniel knew exactly what the dream meant, what the vision meant, and he was reluctant to give voice to it. He cared about Nebuchadnezzar. He had forgiven Nebuchadnezzar for all Nebuchadnezzar had done. And he liked the man. And he didn't want to wish this on his man. Have you ever said, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy? Well, Nebuchadnezzar is no longer his enemy. And he does not wish it. He doesn't want God to do this. And a little part of him was probably afraid as well. Who wants to tell this powerful man bad news? Sometimes the bearer of bad news is the one who lost their life. And the king realizes that. Nebuchadnezzar is standing there watching Daniel's face as he tells Daniel his dream. And as he watches those fleeting expressions as it crosses Daniel's heart and mind, he is knowing right away. Daniel knows exactly what it is, and it's not good. And Daniel has to make a decision. Does he lie to him, or does he tell him the truth? And Nebuchadnezzar knows that a lot of people lie to him because they're afraid of him, but he does not want Daniel to have that burden. He doesn't want that. He looks at Daniel and he says, Daniel, don't be disturbed. Don't let this weigh on you. Tell me the truth. It's not going to be bad news for you, Daniel. Don't let it alarm you. Tell me the truth. What does it mean? Daniel says, I wish I could give this dream interpretation. I wish I could say it was about your enemies, Lord. Oh, King, I don't want to give you this message. But this is a message from God. This is a message. In verse 20, he says, the tree that you saw, which became large and grew strong, whose height reached into the sky and was visible to all the earth, and whose foliage was beautiful, and its fruit abundant, and in which was food for all, under which the beasts of the field dwell, and in those branches the birds of the sky lodged. It is you, O King. Do you see yourself? This is you. And I think Nebuchadnezzar suspected that. I think he suspected that. He said, it's you, O King, for you have become great and grown strong, and your majesty has become great and has reached into the skies. And your dominion to the end of the earth. In that the king saw an angelic watcher, a holy one, descending from heaven and saying, chop down the tree and destroy it, yet leave the stump with its roots in the ground, but with a band of iron and bronze around it, the new grass of the field, and let him be drenched in the dew of heaven, and let him share with the beasts of the field until 7 periods of time pass over him. Dear God, I wish I didn't have to tell you this. Dear King, excuse me. I wish I didn't have to tell you this. But in verse 24, but this is the interpretation, O King, and this is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon my Lord the King. that you be driven away from mankind, and your dwelling place be with the beasts of the field, and that you be given grass to eat like cattle, and that you will be drenched with the dew of the heaven, and 7 periods of time will pass over you until you recognize that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind, and he bestows it on whomever he wishes. O King Nebuchadnezzar, that mighty tree was you. And Yahweh God has raised you up, and he's made you the ruler that you are, and he's given you the kingdoms that you have. But you don't recognize him for that. And he has given you experiences, and he has given you testimonies that you should have recognized him by now. You think you're doing it all on your own, and you're not. Do we ever do that? In this day and time? How much Nebuchadnezzar's in you? I know I've got a lot in me. I'm going to root him out every once in a while. Do you take credit when you should be giving it to God? God raises up who he chooses and bestows on him what he wishes. In verse 26, and in that it was commanded to leave the stump with the roots in the tree, your kingdom will be assured to you after you recognize that it is heaven that rules. He said, I want you to know. He said, Yahweh God is so powerful that he's telling you that even though you're going through 7 years of insanity, you will come back to your mind, and he's going to hold your kingdom for you until you do. But therefore, O King, Daniel just can't hardly bear this. So he's going to give him some godly advice in verse 27. He's going to give him some very godly advice to King Nebuchadnezzar. He says, therefore, O King, may my advice be pleasing to you. In other words, please take my advice, Nebuchadnezzar. Break away now from your sins by doing righteousness, and from your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, in case there may be a prolonging of your prosperity. You may yet change God's mind if you change now. Become that benevolent king. Become that caring king, that loving king. Embrace your kingdom. Be good to the poor. Do anything you can to show God that you've changed, that you give him the glory, and that you know you sit on your throne because he placed you there. King Nebuchadnezzar, take my advice. You may change God's mind that he doesn't do this. He may prolong your prosperity. He may prolong your today if he sees that you're giving up your prideful self, that you're giving him the glory, and that you're acknowledging that he is the God, the only God. Oh, King Nebuchadnezzar, please take my advice. Does he? Read the rest of the chapter to find out. This has been a wonderful study so far. And we just got started. It's 12 chapters. And this is the first 4. Hope you have a good week. May God bless you. He's a wonderful God.